The letter arrived on a Friday afternoon, which is the worst possible time to receive bad news because it means you spend the entire weekend with it sitting on your kitchen counter staring at you while every government office and attorney's phone goes unanswered. I read it standing at my front door, still in my chef's whites, still smelling like the restaurant, garlic and wood smoke, and the particular combination of exhaustion and satisfaction that comes after a 14-hour service. I had driven home from the restaurant at 11:30 p.m., and I had a certified mail notice in my mailbox that I had somehow missed in the morning rush, and I had swung by the post office on the way home because I had learned over the years that certified mail does not get better with waiting. Violation notice. Section 5, subsection B. Outdoor cooking structures and installations exceeding standard grill specifications must receive prior ARC approval. Your outdoor kitchen installation has not received such approval. You are required to remove the installation within 60 days or face fines of $300 per week. I folded the letter, I put it in my pocket, I went inside. My outdoor kitchen was visible through the back window, 8 burners, a wood-fired oven, a cold storage unit, a stainless prep surface that I had custom fabricated, a ventilation hood that I had sourced from a restaurant supply company. It had taken me 4 months to plan and 3 weeks to build. It was, genuinely and without false modesty, the finest outdoor cooking installation I had ever seen on a residential property, because I had built it with 22 years of professional kitchen knowledge and the particular obsession of someone who finally, after 2 decades of cooking in other people's spaces, had a kitchen that was entirely his own. I looked at it through the window. I thought about the HOA board president, a woman named Constance Abernethy, who had sat across from me at the Glenwood Hills Charity Gala 2 years ago and spent 45 minutes trying to convince me to cater the HOA's annual summer party. I had politely declined because I do not cater HOA parties. I cook at my restaurant. I occasionally do private events for specific clients. I do not do HOA parties. Constance had been persistent. She had mentioned the outdoor kitchen I was planning. She had said, "Oh, that sounds wonderful. You'll have to have us all over sometime." I had smiled and said something non-committal and moved on to the next conversation. That was 2 years ago. This was now. I put the letter in a folder. I poured myself a glass of wine from a bottle I had been saving for something worth celebrating. I decided that what I was about to do absolutely qualified. My name is Marco Bellini. I am 47 years old, and I am the executive chef and owner of Bellini, a restaurant that has held 2 Michelin stars for the past 6 years, and that was named by a national food publication as one of the 20 best restaurants in the country 3 years running. I have written 2 cookbooks, appeared on 4 television programs, and cooked for 3 heads of state, none of whom I am permitted to name, but one of whom asked for seconds of the risotto, which is the thing I am most proud of in my professional life. I tell you all of this not to impress you, but because it is essential context for what follows, because the HOA board of Glenwood Hills did not know most of it when they sent me that letter. Or rather, they knew some of it, in the vague way that people know things about a neighbor who is occasionally on television and whose restaurant they have heard of but probably not visited. They knew I was a chef. They did not know what that meant, precisely, in terms of what I was capable of building in a backyard, and what I was prepared to do when someone told me to tear it down. I bought my home at 3 Ridgecrest Way in the Glenwood Hills HOA community 4 years ago. I chose it for several specific reasons: the lot size, which is generous, the mature trees that screen the backyard from the street, the southern exposure that means the outdoor space gets full afternoon sun, and the neighborhood's general character, established, quiet, the kind of place where people mind their own business and maintain their properties with care. Glenwood Hills has an HOA. I knew this when I bought. The CC and RS are 31 pages, and I read them before closing. I am not the kind of person who signs documents without reading them. The relevant provision, Section 5, subsection B, states that outdoor cooking structures exceeding standard grill specifications require ARC approval. I noted this. I intended to file an ARC application when the time came. I did not file an ARC application when the time came, because when the time came I was in the middle of a 4-month stretch that included a cookbook deadline, a television appearance, 2 international cooking events, and the management crisis that resulted in me losing 2 sous chefs simultaneously and having to restructure my kitchen team from the ground up. By the time I came up for air, the outdoor kitchen was built, and I had missed the application step entirely. This was my mistake. I acknowledge it completely. But there is a difference between a mistake and a catastrophe, and the HOA's determination that I needed to remove the entire installation, not modify it, not receive retroactive approval, but remove it, felt less like the correction of an oversight and more like the exercise of authority for its own sake. Let me tell you about Constance Abernethy. Constance has been HOA board president of Glenwood Hills for 5 years. She is 63, retired from a career in pharmaceutical sales, and has brought to the HOA board the same combination of persistence, organizational energy, and absolute confidence in her own judgment that presumably served her well in pharmaceutical sales, and that serves the HOA well in some respects and poorly in others. She's the kind of person who runs meetings efficiently, sends follow-up emails promptly, and enforces rules consistently, except, I had come to learn through various neighbor conversations, in cases where the violation belongs to someone she likes or considers important. Her own property had a decorative fountain in the front yard that technically required ARC approval and had never received it. Her friend Helen Marsh had a pergola structure in her backyard that exceeded the square footage limit. Neither had received violation notices. But my outdoor kitchen, my professional, immaculate, architecturally coherent outdoor kitchen, had received one within 3 weeks of completion. I called my neighbor across the street, a man named David Wu, who works in construction management and who I had come to trust as both a friend and a reliable source of neighborhood intelligence. David said, Constance has been making comments about the outdoor kitchen since the delivery trucks showed up. She told someone at the last board meeting that it looked like a commercial installation and didn't belong in a residential neighborhood. I said, it is a commercial-grade installation. That's what I build. That's what I know. David said, I know, but Constance apparently told the board it was setting a precedent. I said, setting a precedent for what? Good cooking. David said, for I think, the idea that if you allow one person to install a commercial-grade outdoor kitchen, everyone will want one. I said, David, is that actually a problem? He was quiet for a moment. He said, no, it's not, but Constance has decided it is, and she runs the board. I said, I see. He said, Marco, can I ask, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to think about it very carefully, and then I'm going to do something that is completely within the rules. He said, that sounds ominous. I said, it's not ominous, it's a dinner party. The first thing I did was file an ARC application. Retroactively, yes, but properly, completely, with the thoroughness that 22 years of running a professional kitchen had given me for documentation. My ARC application was 47 pages long. I want to describe this document because it deserves description. Page 1 through 5, Executive Summary and Project Description. The outdoor kitchen at 3 Ridgecrest Way, its dimensions, materials, construction methods, and purpose. Written in the clear, precise language of someone who has reviewed thousands of restaurant health inspection reports and knows how to describe a cooking installation to a regulatory body. Page 6 through 12, Materials Documentation. Every component of the installation, with manufacturer specifications, food-grade certifications where applicable, and architectural drawings showing the integration of each element. The wood-fired oven. Sourced from a Neapolitan manufacturer that has been making ovens for 3 generations. The burner array, custom configured. The ventilation system, which I had engineered specifically for the installation. Every component was more carefully specified than anything else in Glenwood Hills, I was reasonably certain. Page 13 through 19, comparable installations. I had researched residential outdoor kitchen installations that had received HOA approval in comparable communities across the region. I found 11 examples, all approved, all with detailed documentation of the approval process. My installation was larger than some and smaller than others. None had been denied. Page 20 through 28, property impact assessment. My outdoor kitchen is entirely within my property, set back well beyond the required distances from all property lines, screened on 3 sides by existing mature trees, and visible from the street only through a gap in the hedge that existed before I moved in. The assessment included sightline diagrams showing exactly what was, and was not visible from every adjacent property and public right-of-way. Page 29 through 35, noise and odor analysis. I had commissioned an actual acoustic study, yes, a real acoustic study, conducted by a sound engineering firm I had worked with on restaurant design, showing that the outdoor kitchen's operation produced noise levels within residential code requirements at all property lines. The odor section included a discussion of the ventilation system's efficiency and the directional airflow patterns. Page 36 through 42, neighborhood benefit analysis. This section required some creativity, and I enjoyed writing it. I documented the ways in which a high-quality outdoor kitchen installation benefits a neighborhood. Property value correlation studies showing that outdoor entertainment improvements increase adjacent property values. The HOA's own stated goal of maintaining community excellence in residential standards. And a section I was particularly proud of titled Culinary Heritage and Residential Outdoor Cooking, that traced the cultural history of outdoor cooking from ancient Rome through modern American residential practice. Page 43 through 47, the chef's personal statement. I wrote the personal statement last, at 2 in the morning after a service, still in my whites. I wrote about what cooking means, about what a kitchen means, not as a room or set of equipment, but as a space of intention, of craft, of the particular human act of transforming raw ingredients into something nourishing and beautiful. I wrote about why I had built this kitchen in my own backyard after 22 years of cooking in other people's kitchens. I wrote about what it means to finally have a space that is yours. I did not mention the charity gala. I did not mention Constance's repeated attempts to get me to cater the HOA summer party. I did not need to. The letter was doing a different kind of work. I submitted the application on a Monday morning by certified mail, with a digital copy emailed to every board member individually. I then made 11 phone calls. The phone calls. Here is something that most people do not know about the restaurant industry. It is a very small world. 2 Michelin star chefs know other 2 Michelin star chefs. They cook together, they stage in each other's kitchens, they appear at the same events, they share suppliers, they argue about technique and agree about ingredients and disagree about everything else and remain friends through all of it. The community of serious chefs is intimate and interconnected in ways that people outside it rarely understand. I called 11 colleagues. Some of them I had known for decades. Some of them I had cooked with once and stayed in touch with because that is how this world works. I told each of them what I was planning, not the ARC application that was administrative. I told them about the dinner party. Every single one of them said yes. I booked a date 3 weeks out. I began planning the menu on the flight to a cooking event in Chicago, in the margins of an in-flight magazine, because I did not have my notebook, and the idea was already fully formed in my head and needed to be captured somewhere. The dinner party was for 20 guests. It would be held in my backyard, at my outdoor kitchen. The menu would be 8 courses, each one cooked on a different element of the installation: the wood-fired oven, the burners, the cold station, the grill, to demonstrate the full range of what the kitchen could do. The 20 guests would include my 11 chef colleagues, David Wu and his wife, and this was the part I had thought about most carefully: 8 residents of Glenwood Hills, who I invited specifically because they were members of the HOA community, who would see the outdoor kitchen in operation, who would eat the food it produced, and who would form their own opinions about whether this installation belonged in a residential neighborhood. The remaining guest, the 20th, was Constance Abernethy. I personally delivered her invitation. I drove to her house on a Tuesday evening, knocked on her door, and when she opened it, I handed her an envelope. She said, "Marco, what's this?" I said, "I'm hosting a dinner party at my home 3 weeks from Saturday. I'd love for you to come. Consider it an opportunity to see the outdoor kitchen in operation before the ARC makes its decision." She looked at the envelope. She looked at me. She said, "I should tell you that the ARC review process doesn't include." I said, "This isn't part of the ARC process, Constance. It's a dinner party. I'm inviting my neighbors." She said, "I'll think about it." She came. Of course she came. And what happened at that dinner party? The food, the kitchen, the conversation, and the moment when Constance Abernethy realized exactly who she had been threatening to fine. That is the beginning of part 2. Stay with me, part 2 is coming. Part 2 equals. Part 2, too bad I'm the celebrity chef they once begged to hire. Recap, 30 SECONDS. Quick version, I'm Marco Bellini, 2 Michelin star chef, owner of one of the country's top-rated restaurants. I built a professional outdoor kitchen in my backyard, 8 burners, wood-fired oven, custom everything, without filing the required ARC application because I was too busy running a world-class restaurant. The HOA board president Constance Abernethy, who had spent years trying to get me to cater her HOA parties, sent me a removal notice. I filed a 47-page ARC application. Then I invited 20 people to a dinner party, including Constance, and cooked them the meal of their lives on the kitchen she wanted me to tear down. The evening was a Saturday in early October, which is the finest month for outdoor cooking in our part of the country. The heat of summer has broken. The air has that particular clarity that makes everything taste slightly sharper and cleaner, and the light at 6 o'clock is gold and horizontal, and falls on food the way food photographers spend careers trying to recreate artificially. I had been in my backyard since 7 in the morning. My 11 chef colleagues arrived between 4 and 5 in the afternoon. This is how chefs socialize, early, in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, because standing around watching someone else cook is not in our nature. Within 30 minutes of the first arrival, my outdoor kitchen had 7 people working in it simultaneously, which is exactly the kind of organized chaos that a properly designed professional kitchen is built to accommodate. I want to describe what my outdoor kitchen looks like when it is operating at full capacity, because I think it matters for understanding what the Glenwood Hills residents experienced when they arrived. The wood-fired oven, when it reaches temperature, produces a heat shimmer above the flue that is visible from 20 feet away. The burners, when all 8 are active, produce a sound that is not loud but is present, the low sustained roar of controlled fire, the sound of a kitchen working. The ventilation hood draws the smoke and steam upward and outward, away from the seating area, so the guests experience the smells of cooking, wood smoke, browning butter, caramelizing alliums, the particular perfume of bread in a hot oven without the discomfort of smoke in their faces. The aromas, I should tell you, were extraordinary. My colleague Yuki Tanaka, who runs a kaiseki restaurant in the city and whose sensory precision I trust completely, stood at the edge of the kitchen at 5:30 and inhaled and said, "Marco, this is the best-smelling residential outdoor space I have ever been in." I said, "Thank you, that's the oven." She said, "It's everything." The 8 Glenwood Hills residents arrived between 6 and 6:30. David Wu and his wife Alina came first. Then the Hendersons, who live 2 doors down and who have always been pleasant. Then the Okafor family, both physicians, curious and warm. Then 3 couples I knew less well, but had made a point of inviting because they were active in the HOA community and their opinions would matter. And then, at 6:40, Constance Abernethy. She arrived alone. She was dressed carefully, not formally, but with the particular precision of someone who has thought about what to wear to something they are not entirely sure how to categorize. She carried a bottle of wine, which I took as a positive sign. I met her at the gate. I said, "Constance, I'm glad you came, welcome." She looked past me at the outdoor kitchen, at the 7 chefs working in it, at the organized complexity of a professional mise-en place laid out on my prep surfaces, at the wood-fired oven with its door open showing the interior temperature, at the ventilation hood drawing clean air upward into the October evening. She said, "This is quite an operation." I said, "Come and meet some people." I introduced her to my colleagues, to Yuki Tanaka, whose restaurant has 3 Michelin stars and a 6-month waiting list, to James Oganiemi, who had just won the James Beard Award for Outstanding Chef, to Claire Fontaine, whose cookbook had sold 400,000 copies and whose television series was in its 3rd season, to 8 other chefs whose names, if you follow the food world, you would recognize immediately. Constance knew some of the names. I could tell by the slight adjustment in her posture as I made each introduction, the recalibration of a person who is realizing that the room she has walked into is not the room she expected. She said at one point quietly to me, "These are your friends." I said, "These are my colleagues. Some of them are also my friends." She said, "I had no idea you were. I knew you had a restaurant, of course, but..." I said, "The Michelin stars have been public for 6 years, Constance. We've been neighbors for 4. She looked at me. I said, "Come, dinner is about to begin." The 8 courses. I am going to describe what we ate, because food is the point, and I want you to understand what the outdoor kitchen produced that evening. The first course came from the cold station, a composed crudo of local fish, cured for 4 hours in citrus and salt, with a frozen element prepared using liquid nitrogen and served on a slate tile. Cold, precise, luminous. The second course came from the burners, a consommé clarified to absolute transparency, poured tableside from a copper pot, with a single perfect tortellino floating in the center. The consommé had been cooking since noon. It tasted like the concentrated essence of every good meal anyone had ever eaten. The third course was from the wood-fired oven, flatbread, made with a starter I have been maintaining for 11 years, baked at 800 degrees for 90 seconds, charred at the edges in the way that only a wood fire produces, served with cultured butter and flaked salt. Bread, just bread. The table was silent while they ate it. Course 4, 5, and 6 were a progression from the grill, proteins at different temperatures, different resting times, different sauce applications, each one demonstrating a specific technique that the equipment made possible. My colleagues and I were cooking simultaneously across all stations by this point, the kitchen operating as a coordinated unit, each person knowing what the others were doing without needing to be told. The Glenwood Hills residents at the table were watching this. I could see them watching, the way their eyes moved from the kitchen to the food and back, the conversations that stopped mid-sentence as a new course arrived, the particular silence of people who are tasting something that exceeds their frame of reference. Constance Abernethy was seated at the center of the table. I had placed her there deliberately, the best sight line to the kitchen, the optimal position to receive each course, the seat of honor at a table I was presiding over. She ate everything, every course. She asked questions, good questions, the questions of someone who is genuinely curious rather than making conversation. She asked about the oven temperature for the bread. She asked about the consommé clarification process. She asked Yuki Tanaka about the kaiseki philosophy of seasonal ingredients. She was, I realized, someone who genuinely loved food, who had just never had the opportunity to engage with it at this level. I found myself, over the course of the evening, genuinely enjoying her company. This complicated things in ways I had not entirely anticipated. The 8th course was dessert, a tart made with fruit from my own garden, the pastry blind-baked in the wood-fired oven, the custard set using a technique I had developed over years of experimentation. Simple, perfect, the kind of thing that takes 20 years to learn to make simply. After dessert, when the coffee was served and the table had settled into that post-meal contentment that is one of the finest human states. James Ogoniemi, who is an extraordinarily perceptive person as well as a magnificent chef, raised his glass and said, "To Marco, and to this kitchen, which is the finest outdoor cooking installation I have ever seen, and which should be a landmark in this neighborhood rather than a violation notice." Everyone raised their glasses. Constance Abernethy raised hers. She looked at me across the table. I looked at her. The conversation after the other guests had left, my chef colleagues departing with the efficiency of people who have early morning prep to get to, the Glenwood Hills residents departing with the slightly dazed quality of people who have had a transcendent experience, they are still processing. Constance stayed. She helped me carry dishes inside, which I had not asked her to do and which I found oddly touching. At my kitchen counter, stacking dishes, she said, "I owe you an apology." I said, "You don't need to." She said, "I do. I sent you a removal notice for that kitchen without fully understanding what I was looking at. I saw a large installation and I applied the rule and I didn't." She paused. "I didn't think about who you are and what you do and what that kitchen means." I said, "Constance, who I am shouldn't change how the rules are applied. That's not how good governance works." She said, "No, but it changes how I understand what we'd be asking you to give up. And I'll be honest, it changes how I understand what the neighborhood would be giving up." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Every person at that table tonight had an experience they will remember for years. In my own neighborhood, because of that kitchen." She paused. "I told the board it was setting a precedent. I think I was right about that. I just had the precedent backwards. It's setting a precedent for what a residential outdoor space can be." I looked at her. She said, "I'm going to recommend approval at the ARC meeting. Your application it's the most thorough ARC application this neighborhood has ever received, by a significant margin." I said, 47 pages tends to do that." She said, 47 pages. I said, "I had things to say." She almost smiled. Then she said, "I also want to ask, the summer party, the HOA summer party, I know you've said no before and I understand why, and I'm not asking you to cater it, but I wonder if you'd consider consulting on the food, giving whoever does it some guidance on how to make it better." I looked at her. I said, "Constance, I don't consult on HOA parties." She said, "I know, I just thought." I said, "But I will come to the party, as a neighbor, and I will bring food, something from the outdoor kitchen, as a contribution, not as a service." She said, Yes, that would be wonderful." She left at 11:30. I stood at my kitchen door and watched her walk down Ridgecrest Way, and I thought about how complicated people are and how the simplest version of someone, HOA president sends removal notice, chef fights back, is almost never the whole story. The ARC decision. The ARC met 3 weeks after the dinner party. I did not attend. Applicants are not present for ARC deliberations. The decision arrived by email the following morning. Approved with conditions. The conditions were annual inspection of the ventilation system to ensure continued compliance with local air quality standards, and a requirement that any modifications to the installation receive prior ARC review. That was it, 2 conditions, both of which I would have proposed myself. I forwarded the approval to Vivian, my attorney, who had been standing by in case the ARC denied the application and we needed to pursue the appeal process. She wrote back, "Congratulations. Also, that 47-page application was extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it." I wrote back, "I had things to say." I framed the approval letter. It hangs in my restaurant's back office, next to my Michelin star certificates and the James Beard nomination letter from 3 years ago, and a photograph of me and my team on the night we got our 2nd star. It is, in its way, as satisfying as any of those things, because it represents a fight I won not by being famous, not by being powerful, not by being right in a loud way, but by being thorough, by being patient, and by cooking the best meal I could cook and letting people taste what they were asking me to give up. The summer party. The Glenwood Hills HOA summer party was in July. I went. I brought a paella cooked in my outdoor kitchen that morning, transporting in the paella pan itself, served directly from it at the party. The pan was 40 inches across. It fed 60 people. I stood behind the pan and served it myself, because that is what you do when you bring food somewhere. You stay with it, you explain it, you make sure people understand what they're eating. Constance stood next to me for most of the serving. She told people, "Marco made this from his outdoor kitchen, the one the board approved." She said it with a particular emphasis that I appreciated. Several people asked me if I would make it again next year. I said, "Bring good saffron and I'll consider it." Where we are now. The outdoor kitchen has been in operation for 2 years since the ARC approval. I cook in it 2 or 3 times a week when my schedule allows, sometimes elaborate multi-course meals when colleagues or friends are coming, sometimes just a simple dinner for one after a long service, the wood-fired oven doing what it does best, the night air carrying the smoke upward. I have hosted 3 more dinner parties in the backyard. Each one has included at least a few Glenwood Hills residents. David Wu has become a genuine friend. He has the palate of a natural, and I have been teaching him to make pasta, which he is getting better at with each session. 2 other Glenwood Hills residents have filed ARC applications for outdoor kitchen installations since mine was approved. Both were approved. Neither is as large as mine. They are sensible, well-planned, appropriate to their spaces, but they are good, and their owners cook in them, and the neighborhood on summer evenings now has the particular quality of a place where people are making things. I find this deeply satisfying. Constance and I have a functional, occasionally warm relationship. She waves when she sees me. She brought a cutting from her herb garden last spring, which I planted in the raised bed next to the outdoor kitchen, and which has grown into a substantial rosemary bush that I use constantly. She has not, since the dinner party, sent me any violation notices. She has also, I notice, had her decorative fountain registered with the ARC retroactively. She did not make a production of it. It simply appeared in the community records 1 month as having received approval. I did not say anything. It seemed like the kind of thing that didn't require comment. The outdoor kitchen got a brief mention in a food magazine piece about chef home kitchens last spring. The journalist described it as a professional installation of extraordinary quality, situated in a residential backyard in a way that feels inevitable, as if the house had always been waiting for it. I thought that was right. I thought that was exactly right. It had always been waiting for it. It just took a 47-page application and the best dinner party I have ever hosted to make the case. If you ever find yourself in a fight about something you built well, with knowledge and care and the right materials, do not dismantle it. Document it, explain it, cook the best meal you can, and invite the people who want it gone to sit at the table. Let them taste what they're asking you to give up.